we also gain a new appreciation for Steven. So if you didn't like Steven in the first couple of episodes, you will understand him so much more. And I'm getting choked up talking about this. Hey guys, welcome back to Candid Cinema. I'm Amanda, otherwise known as AMX NDA Reviews on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Today I will be reviewing episode 5 of Moon Knight. So this hat, first and foremost, is custom made by my good friend Stefano Bove on Instagram. The link is below. He has made custom hats for Captain America and Loki and now Moon Knight. So I'm really happy that I'm repping this merchandise because there hasn't been much merchandise for Moon Knight. So definitely go check this out on Instagram. Again, the link is below. But guys, this episode of Moon Knight is something that I have been waiting for. Now, this is the first episode out that I did not get access to beforehand. And I woke up at 3 a.m. to watch this because I absolutely love the show. After this episode, I can honestly say that this is the best MCU show out of all of them. I personally think that this is my favorite. I feel like this is my favorite, especially after this episode. So episode 5 starts off with a flashback. It's raining as we see, and then it goes into this cave. We get a quick cut to what seems to be Mark's mother, and then it flashes directly to Mark sitting in Harrow's office. Now, Harrow goes on to say that Mark has been sitting there with him for hours, and he has been trying to go back into his memories, trying to understand what's happening in his mind as Harrow is helping him through it as his psychologist. So he is in this mental ward, and as he is talking to Harrow and going through these steps, he then goes into his head once again and cuts to Steven and Taweret. So as we get this mixture of flashbacks going to Steven, going to Harrow, we understand Mark a bit more. And this is the episode that many of us were waiting for because Mark has been such a surface level character right now as the mercenary. And we've gotten to know Steven a bit more. So in this episode, not only do we get to know more about Mark, which is one of the most traumatic past that any MCU character has had, we also gain a new appreciation for Steven. So if you didn't like Steven in the first couple of episodes, you will understand him so much more. And I'm getting choked up talking about this because what is exposed in this episode is the fact that Mark has to understand where Steven stems from. And Ethan Hawke does an incredible job as Dr. Harrow to talk him through whatever is happening in the ward, in that room with him, in him trying to process these memories. So what I thought director Mohamed Diab did so well in this is that he structured the psych ward as doorways to Mark's memories. And I thought that was really different. It was interesting to see that. And in each door frame, he would put a different memory for Steven and Mark to kind of look through. As we get those images, Taweret also explains who she is and that she is the goddess that helps these souls pass through the afterlife. So there are a couple of key words that were used in this episode to kind of explain the DID that Mark has, and then how it ties into the Egyptian mythology of the underworld, thanks to Khonshu. So Mark has so much going on in his head. That's why it's a bit broken down, but we learn about who he is and what DID actually is. And I think it's really important that this episode exists for many people. I understand that it does flow into like the Egyptian mythology and you kind of lose what the disorder is, but they showed it so well in this episode that like I cried for the majority of it just because of how heartbreaking it was. So I didn't really know what the term was, but I did mention it on Movie Files Live last week, is that Mark creates Steven and creates him as this like safe haven of his memories that is tied to his mother and his family and the movies that he used to watch as a kid. And it's called an organizing principle. So we learn that in this episode, and Mark is very conscious of this as Harrow is sitting there telling him what he's doing in his own mind. So there are pieces of Mark that are placed in different locations. For example, it could be, the Egyptian tomb. It could be, the psych ward. He breaks it off into little things. It could be London with Stephen. So he has these little pockets in his mind that he's able to go to and transfer himself whenever he needs to. So it's more of like a safety net that he's created for Stephen. And I think that that is the best way that they could have described this in a Moon Knight show. And then on top of that, as Mark did get shot, as he's been saying that he's gotten shot, he has to go on this journey with Tawareth to balance the scales. So in Egyptian mythology, when you balance the scales, they take your heart out and place it on the scale to see if you are able to cross over to the underworld. So now in this episode, Tawareth guides them and tells them what to do. But if the scales don't balance in time, then the realm of the Duat, the people from the sand, that this boat that they have that will travel across to the other side, basically, they will come and grab them and they won't be able to make it to the afterlife. So they have a nice tie into Egyptian mythology. So while they're crossing the sea of sand and the scales are balancing, and Tawareth took Stephen's heart and Mark's heart, but she said that they were both incomplete. They have to go through Mark's memories in order for Stephen to understand Mark. And I think that is what was so freaking interesting about this episode, is that you had Mark cycling back into very, very traumatic moments in his life and not have Stephen as a separate section in his mind, as someone that carries the happy memories, whereas Mark has to deal with his darkness. And that's what makes Marc Spector one of the best Marvel characters to exist, because of how layered and how complex he is as a human first, in regards to how he has treated his own trauma, how he has treated the people that he has killed on all of those missions when he was working with Bushman and then working with Khonshu and then taking over. He remembers all the lives that he took. So as we go through this, through the ward, through Dr. Harrow kind of assisting him and trying to talk to Stephen and trying to bring Stephen out of him, in that room separately, Mark goes back to his childhood. He goes back to when his mother would abuse him. And he goes back to a very, very dark time in his life where the DID first kind of took place, because he wanted to hide away from his mother. Now, these are major spoilers. So Stephen opens one of the doors in the ward because he hears this child. He goes into this room and there are all of these people. They're in stone. They have these white eyes and they have their own vases in front of them, their own sarcophagus in front of them, miniature size. And they're all sitting at these tables in this ward, and it's all the people that Mark had killed. So it's very eerie. And Mark's saying, I killed this person in this country. I killed this person in this country. He's like, no. I can't believe that this is here. Like, this is a room that's been locked in his mind, locked away, like deep inside, that he remembers each person that he killed. And Stephen's kind of blown away. It's like, why would you have a whole room dedicated to this? Why would you keep this? And Mark's like, you remember every single person that you killed. So then this kid comes out and Stephen's like, oh, he's so friendly. There's a child, but he's looking at Mark like, I thought you drew the line at kids. Like, I thought that, like, you would never kill a child, which he had said in previous episodes, but through Stephen. So we have to remember that as well. So this kid ends up being Mark's younger brother. And then Mark is trying to prevent Stephen from going to see what had happened with his younger brother, Ro. And long story short, Mark took him to a cave, which we saw at the beginning of this episode, and he ended up drowning. And his mother ended up blaming Mark for her youngest child's death. So Mark's past is filled with trauma, filled with traumatic moments. His mother had suffered from her own mental illness, and she took that out on Mark. We find out that Mark created Steven all those years back from the movie poster, from Dr. Stephen Grant. He was this hero, this adventurer who would be there for Mark and his young brother Ro. They would be quoting lines to each other, as we saw in this episode. It's just such an emotional episode, and Mark ends up realizing that that was the first moment when his mother first started abusing him, that he would change into Steven. And we see that transition from a child, which is just so hard to watch. But we see that at first, and then Mark kind of pulls Steven out of it, because Steven is everything that's good and pure that he remembers from his childhood. He gave Stephen Grant this persona of this archaeologist who loves Egyptian mythology. He gave him that so he could go there for safety and happiness. And the reason why Stephen and Mark started bleeding into each other is because Mark's mom had passed away, couldn't keep Stephen separate. He couldn't keep lying to himself that his mother was actually dead. So then that would lead to Stephen not being able to consciously call his mom. And the way that this was executed, the way that this was done, this episode's really going to stay with me because it's just so freaking good. The way that this was written was really interesting. They also went back to when Mark went to Khonshu and he was about to take his own life, and Khonshu came to him at his weakest point, but Mark wanted to continue doing what he had to do. So if he could live and then take his anger out from his childhood through Khonshu in doing some sort of good and taking out people that were already doing bad things, then he took it. He took this opportunity to be his avatar. So the more that Mark comes to terms with Stephen and Stephen understands Mark, the scales start to balance. And then at the end of this episode, when Stephen and Mark understand each other, and then Stephen kind of like goes to bat for Mark while the sand people are coming at Mark to kind of take him into the sea because he can't cross over if the scales aren't balanced. We see a different side of Stephen. And then in doing so, in protecting Mark, which is like realistically, when you think about it, Stephen's also a projection of his younger brother. So it does pull at the heartstrings there too, and will make you emotional. Stephen ends up taking out the last sand person that was coming from Mark, and he ends up falling overboard into the sea of sand. And Mark is trying to like call for Stephen. He can't get to him because he's still on the ship, and then the scales balance. And that I found really interesting. So in order for Mark to move forward and pass over to the afterlife, essentially, he had to shed Stephen. He had to shed his traumatic past. And we lose Stephen. Stephen turns to like sandstone, if you want to say it that way. But it means that Mark is going to the afterlife. Taworth does say that they will kind of access Khonshu if they can to come save Mark. So Mark ends up going to what I believe is the ancestral plane, because it was a beautiful field right after that, after the scales balanced, after Taworth said she was going to go to Osiris and try to navigate a pathway to Khonshu in order to go back up to the surface level, because Harrow's been sending these spirits who the underworld prematurely without balancing the scales. So he's really disrupting everything with what he needs to do with Amit. But yes, Mark ends up going to what I believe is the ancestral plane, which is also a link to Black Panther. So I feel like they're doing like little things to connect this universe, and there's no cameos, no big thing like that. So I appreciate it. But the final shot of Marc Spector in this field with Spanish music playing in the background, and it's just like beautiful golden hour. I think that fade out was really something of like a rebirth, like he's reborn in that case, and he has come to terms with his trauma. And I think that's the best way to describe what episode 5 does for Marc Spector. I still think that Oscar Isaac is giving the best performance that has ever been given in the MCU. He is on another level of acting. So if I had to do predictions, I think that we are going to get Jake Lockley in 6, because Taworth said that in order for Mark to head back to the surface, he needs another body. And I think that he's going to kind of create someone else. And then that's going to be Jake Lockley, which will then tie him to New York City, which makes complete sense because that's where Moon Knight originally came from. So I think that that's where they're going to go with this. I am really excited for episode 6. This is the god tier level of the MCU shows that we have been waiting for. The pacing in every single episode, I keep saying it, is top notch. I am never bored watching one episode. The runtime is perfect in length. I think it was about like 50 minutes and it works. Episode 5 just went all in to Marc's backstory, and this is something that we all needed. I don't think it's a bit late in the season to present Marc's backstory the way they did. I love that they had different floors in Marc's old house as a kid to kind of show Steven the moments where it really traumatized Marc. And I think that that was a unique way to show that, kind of like WandaVision and how they did that. That was the episode in WandaVision that I really appreciated in regards to really dealing with your trauma. But this one in Moon Knight, just my goodness. Let me know how you guys feel about episode 5. I'm absolutely blown away by this episode. Probably one of my favorite episodes out of all the MCU shows. It's like top tier for me. It's fantastic. And I say that 5 is better than 4, and then 5 is the best episode out of the season so far. So please let me know what you guys think about episode 5. Let me know about Oscar Isaac, your predictions for episode 6. And tonight, make sure to check out live stream discussion over at Movie Files Live at 5 p.m. Central, so 6 p.m. Eastern, and then head over to the Suit Up Geeks tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, because we are doing an episode 5 breakdown on both shows. So make sure to check that out tonight. And guys, I can't wait for episode 6. I'm so stoked. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. You can always follow me over at AMX NDA Reviews on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. I'll catch you guys next time. Keep watching movies.